So, hello, I am Gene Montrastelli, the editor of tappingqa.com, and today we're going to talk about and do some time tapping for procrastination, and I'm actually going to share with you the process that I use every single morning. Now, the reason why on this opening slide I have a picture of a sloth is not because when we are procrastinating we are moving at a sloth pace, but if in the middle of the day there are images of sloths on my computer, it is because I am procrastinating. I think they're absolutely amazing creatures. I'm fascinated by them. And if I fall down an internet rabbit hole chasing a shiny object, very often it is because of our friend the sloth. And I just find them absolutely amazing. I even spent a number of days at a sloth rescue in Costa Rica a number of years ago. And every single morning at breakfast, after I ate breakfast, I got to bottle feed little baby sloths, which was absolutely amazing. But in the middle of the day, when we're trying to get something done, as lovely as that is something that is problematic. So we're going to take a look at procrastination. We're going to talk about why procrastination shows up. And then once we realize that's the case, I'm going to show you a really simple process, like I use all of the time, on how I uncover why I'm procrastinating, how to tap for that, and then we're going to find the things that you aren't doing. A bunch of you are going to get a chance to talk about that, and we're going to clear that out today. So, like we talked about in the class on Thursday night, the parts that we have are trying to keep us safe. Procrastination is no different. It is just a part of us that is trying to keep us safe. Typically, when we are procrastinating, it is to avoid something. And it might be the task, it might be the consequence of the task, it might be how we're noticed in the task, but there's a consequence. And to help me understand and process that and working with my clients, I've come to the realization why there are 4 reasons why we don't take action, reasons why we procrastinate. Number 1 is we don't know what we want. If we don't know what we want, we're not going to take action. And sometimes it's not even an issue of knowing what we want, but maybe it's not having clarity about what we want. We have a vague sense of what we want. And the reason why we don't take action when we don't know what we want is there is a part of us that wants to make sure that we are not taking the wrong action. It wants to make sure that we're not wasting time and we're not wasting energy. And so if we don't have clarity to move forward, there are going to be subconscious blocks that are put up in the way from taking action, so we are not wasting time or wasting energy. But intellectually, we understand the fact that time is a zero-sum game, meaning that if I do one thing, I'm not doing something else. So if my system is afraid that I'm going to go down the wrong path, and so the way it's keeping me safe is not by doing anything at all, by I'm not wasting time and energy, I'm actually wasting time because that time is evaporating and I'm not doing something. But recognizing and checking in if we don't know what we want is a great way to figure out why we're not taking action. The second is we don't know how to do it. I don't know about you, but I am not super keen on wasting time and energy in things that I am not as competent at. You know, as time passes, there are things that I get better and better at. And so what happens is I like to lean on my strengths. Now, in many situations, it's great for us to lean on and tune into our strengths, but it becomes problematic if I'm not spending time on learning other skills or doing the things that I'm not good at, which prevents me from being successful. But what I do is I avoid the things I'm not good at, and I go towards the things that I am good at. It is painful to take action. Now, there are multiple different types of painful to take action. July 26th at 12 noon in Miami, Florida, it would be painful to be tarring a roof right now because it is hot, it is humid, and you're dealing with something that is really hot as well, meaning you're probably wearing protective gear. That is physically painful to do. Other times it's painful to take action because of the way that we are perceived by other people. I work with lots and lots of clients who are in a situation where, because of their natural giftedness and their natural disposition, they were the black sheep of their family. And so whenever they did the thing that felt natural to them, they felt like an outsider. So taking action was immediately judged by the people around them. So it's not that it is physically painful to take the action, but it is the judgment that comes with taking that action. The fourth reason we don't take action is it is painful for us to be successful. And this is a sneaky hidden reason why we don't take action. Because oftentimes we are not in the circumstance where we are thinking about that there's any consequences that are bad for us achieving our goals. And whenever I think about this, I always think of two clients that really illustrate this very, very well. The first client was a client where we were doing weight release, and she just wanted to be healthier, and there were 35 pounds that she wanted to get rid of. And we were bumping into resistance to her taking action. Like she would make good action for a day or two, and then she would backslide. And as we were poking around this and using the process that I'm going to teach you here in just a moment, what she said with this amazing amount of clarity is, I have heard how my friends talk about skinny people. If I lose weight, my friends are going to say those horrible things about me as well. So in this case, being successful isolated her from the community that she was already a part of. And so on a subconscious level, it is lose some weight or lose the people I'm closest to. Emotionally, she's going to choose community over losing weight. And so that was the reason why she wasn't taking action. Another example, a client who was in a circumstance growing up that whatever the highest score that she received on a test in school, all of a sudden that became the benchmark. So if she got an 85, 85 was the benchmark. And so anything worse than an 85 was bad because she demonstrated she could get an 85. Well, off the next test, if she got an 87, all of a sudden 87 became the benchmark because she demonstrated she could get an 87 to her parents. Therefore, anything below an 87 was now bad. Then if she got a 91, anything below a 91 was bad. And so what she learned from that experience is every single time I am successful, even if I have to work really hard in the moment to be that successful, all of a sudden that becomes normal. So it was no longer safe for her to be more successful than she was in the past emotionally, because it was creating this new benchmark that created problems for her. So as a practical matter, when I am looking at why I am not taking action on something, I like to look through these four lenses. I don't know what I want. I don't know how to do it. It's painful to take action. It's painful to be successful. And as you think about some of the things that you struggle with to take action, I would be willing to bet as you process back through that there are going to be a number of cases where it's not just one of these things, but it's multiple things showing up at the exact same time. Or it could be a circumstance that you're working towards something that is multifaceted, where you're having to do a number of steps to do it, and the resistance to take action can show up in any of these four areas for each of the actions. So action number one, I'm completely new to, and so I don't have clarity, so I'm not taking action because I don't want to go the right way. Where action number three, I'm in a circumstance where people are going to see me doing something publicly, and I'm afraid I'm going to be judged, so it's painful to take the action because the way that I'm perceived. And so this is a lens. This isn't the only lens. This isn't the best lens, but for me, this is a really great lens. And the way I found this lens was a number of years ago, as I was really starting to think about procrastination and self-sabotage more and more, I went back and listened to a bunch of old client sessions. And over the course of listening to those old client sessions, that's where these four things emerged from. It was from hearing clients speak in a first-person way as to why they were getting stuck. And something that's really important to recognize when we are looking at these four things is that there can be a practical aspect to this, and there can be an emotional aspect to this. So for example, I don't know what I want. For some people, they don't know how to create a plan or even to write a goal statement. That oftentimes when I am working with my clients, they don't know what they want. But and I have a clever way around that. I ask them, what don't you want? And then we start naming the opposite of that thing. But there's actually a skill in being able to come up with a goal or come up with a plan. So not knowing what to do, the procrastination isn't necessarily a tapping issue. It's actually a skill issue. The exact same thing. Let's say that for my activity, I need to build a website. But if I don't know how to build websites, I'm not going to take action because I don't know how to do it. But that's not an emotional thing. That's just a practical issue. But at the exact same time, all four of the areas can have emotional components as well. And it's interesting as we move from 1 to 4, the further we get down that chain, the more likely it's going to be an emotional issue and the less likely it's going to be a practical issue. Because in step 1 and 2, it's about creating the plan and knowing how to do something. And there can be either emotional or practical issues to that. And then once we get into the taking of action, it's painful to take action, it's painful to be successful. There are fewer practical aspects to those two things. And so it gives us the ability to what's going on. All of that is to say that for me, when I am trying to solve a problem and I'm not taking the action that I want, the first questions I am asking myself is I'm asking myself the practical questions. Do I know how to do it? Do I have the resources? And the resources could be the education, the tools like a piece of software, the time, whatever those things are. Because if I don't know how to do something, it doesn't matter how much tapping I do, because tapping isn't going to make me magically do something. So just dispositionally, because I'm a real practicalist, I always start with trying to figure out, do we know how to do something and do we have a clear plan? Because oftentimes when we know how to do something and we have a clear plan, things click into place and we just start taking action and we start moving forward in a really natural way. Where if we get all of those things in place and then it's still not happening, then it becomes this great opportunity to figure out why. Because if you know what to do, you know how to do it, and you have the resources to do it, and you're not doing it, then we know clearly it is something that is emotional. And so by thinking practically first, those are oftentimes the easiest things for us to figure out intellectually. And then once all of those boxes are checked, then we know for certain it's going to be emotional. And then we're going to step into the tapping process. So before I start to introduce the process, what I want you to give you a chance to do is to ask any questions that you have about the disposition as to why we don't take action and those 4 things. If you want to do that, just zip on over here to the chat box, tap your questions in, and I'll answer those. And if we don't have any questions, or once we answer those, then what we'll do is we'll move on to the next one. Okay, excellent. Does not appear to be any questions about that. So either that was explained really, really clearly, or it was completely incomprehensible and you don't know where to start asking a question. So let's go on to the process. Now, when I say this is a process that I use regularly, this is a process I use every single morning. And so I'm going to teach you the process. I'm going to teach you how I do this every single day. Then we're going to try it out so you can see exactly what it's like firsthand. So the process looks like this. So the first thing I do is I imagine myself doing the task. And that could be a task as small as sending an email, making a call. It could be as big as a task as all day I'm going to spend time completely reorganizing my house, whatever it is. But I imagine myself doing the task. One of the wonderful things about the human experience is we can have an emotional response about something even if we are not doing it, simply imagining ourselves doing it. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to have the exact same emotional charge, but you know what it's like to think about something that you are worried about. And if you imagine yourself doing it, like I do lots of work with fears and phobias, and I can say, I want you to imagine a spider. And some of my clients literally shake just at the word spider because the image of it is enough to get there. So if we imagine ourselves doing something, we're going to get a lot of emotional information coming from the particular experience. After we imagine taking action, we tune into the resistance that we are feeling. Now, you'll notice on here, it says, tune into the resistance you feel in your body. There are some exceptions to that, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Now, we're tuning into the resistance in our body for a really particular reason. We are really notoriously bad eyewitnesses to our own experience. And the reason we are bad eyewitnesses to our own experience is our brain is built in such a way that it wants to have a pattern. It wants to have a cause and effect relationship. And so intellectually, we are constantly creating connections so that we can explain why we are the way that we are. So as an example, recently I was tapping with a client who was afraid of speaking in public and had to give a presentation at work. And she showed up in her intake form and she said, I'm afraid to speak in public. I have to give this presentation. And the reason why is when I was in grade school, I was doing show and tell one time and it went really badly and everybody laughed at me. And so we have a very clear cause and effect relationship. This thing happened in the past. It created a belief. Therefore, I'm afraid of public speaking. Well, we did some investigation, and the reality was the reason why she was afraid to give the presentation is her boss was going to be in the room, and she was afraid that she was going to look silly in front of her boss. So if we only would have tapped on the story that she told me, which was a coherent story, it made sense. But if we only tapped and worked on that particular memory, it would not have impacted the way that she felt giving the presentation at work, because the childhood memory was not the thing causing the fear. So when we are tuning into a physical sensation and we're creating a part, what we're doing is we're giving ourselves the ability to disassociate from our intellectual conscious mind and get information from the subconscious mind, which has a tendency to be significantly clearer and much more related to what is going on. I was one time working on a client with doing an email campaign, and she said, this probably has nothing to do with it. Whenever a client says that, I know to really pay close attention. She said, I know that this probably doesn't have anything to do with it, but when I was 9 years old, I was a prisoner of war in North Africa for 18 months. Now, we are doing work on an email campaign, and just all of a sudden, this memory comes popping into mind. Well, there's probably a really clear reason as to why those things are connected. And so the reason we are tuning into a resource in our body the way that we're experiencing it is we're giving ourselves the ability to get information that is less filtered by the conscious mind and more unfiltered from the subconscious mind, which is going to present us with more information that is truth. So when we tune into this, most of the time it's going to show up as a physical sensation. It might be a tightness in the throat or butterflies in the stomach or tightness and heaviness in the shoulders. Now, it also might be something that shows up outside of the body. And what I mean by that is it might feel like a wall that is in front of us, or something that is chasing us down, or something that is chaining us to the ground. Occasionally, it simply shows up as a chattery voice inside of the head. So when I'm working with a client and I say, I want you to tune into what is going on in the body, is there a physical sensation that you're noticing right now? Or is it maybe like something outside, like a pressure, or is it a chatter inside of your head? The other thing that I like to do when I'm giving examples to my clients is I like to give a number of different examples, but I always give an example that is atypical to what we would expect to be the response, because I want to give the client permission to say anything they want. So if we're dealing with a sense of nervousness, I'm like, great, where do you notice that? Is that tightness in the chest? Is that butterflies in the stomach? Or do you feel sweaty hands? So you'll notice in the example I just gave right there is I gave 3 typical responses to what feeling nervous is. And so what I've communicated in subtext to my client is, I want you to tell me in the terms of what we normally say is nervousness, what is going on. But if I said instead, do you feel a tightness in your chest, butterflies in your stomach, or does it feel like your hair is on fire? By giving a third option that is not a typical response to the type of thing that they are feeling, I'm giving the client permission to say whatever they are experiencing. So in a really small, subtle way, what I'm doing is I'm giving them permission to be a little more creative and tell me what is going on. Because when we're working with someone else, they're trying to have the practitioner like them if they know it or not in a conscious or subconscious way. So they want to give right answers when we're doing this. So I'm giving them permission to do something else. So again, we imagine what is going on. We tune into the place that is showing up in the body. Now, once we've identified the place that it's showing up in the body, we ask the sensation 2 questions. The first, well, it's 2 parts. The first part has 2 questions to it. The first question we ask is, what are you afraid of and what will go wrong? And it's if we do this action. Again, we started out thinking about taking an action. We felt something in the body. We stepped into it. We started to feel it. We then asked these questions. What are you afraid of and what will go wrong? Now, when we do this, if you need to imagine putting a little cartoony face on the front of the physical sensation, do it. But just give the part permission to communicate. Again, this is us disassociating, so our conscious mind isn't just trying to come up with a solution, but we're listening to the body. I love doing this with clients is because you'll literally see them pause for a moment. Sometimes their lips will move, kind of like they're talking to themselves, which is perfectly okay. And then you'll literally see them go, or ah. And you can see information dawning on them. Information that makes sense, but it's not information that they had access to in a conscious way. But this information, these things we've talked about, my friends will say horrible things about me. I'm creating new standards. I've failed before, I'm going to fail again. Like there's all sorts of information that can come forward, and there might actually be multiple pieces of information. Like, why is this going to go wrong? And it comes with 2 or 3 reasons. This is one of the reasons why I love tapping with a piece of paper nearby, so that if multiple reasons come forward, I can jot those down and I can take them one at a time. Now, after I've asked the question and I've got information back, the next step is to ask another question. And that question is, what proof do you have this will go wrong? So, if I do this, I'm going to create a new standard. If I do this, people are going to judge me. If I do this, I'm going to fail. Whatever those are, what proof does it have that this will go wrong? Now, this question does not always have information that comes along with it. Sometimes there is no proof. And you know what it's like to have a subconscious belief that intellectually is not true, but emotionally gets spoken forward. So if there is no information, a couple of things will happen. One is the emotion might actually go down. Simply by recognizing the thing that it is afraid of is not true, the emotion will go down. The other thing is no information or proof can be there, and the emotion still doesn't change. So just because we know there is no proof to this belief doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go down. But if it does give us proof and it tells us a story or an experience or something a loved one said along the way in the past, we now have more resources to tap on. So for example, if a memory is coming from the past, you can use a tool like the movie technique or to tell a story technique or some parts work with a child at that age, but it has uncovered this thing that is really, truly unexpected. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. I was working with a client who was a college professor. She'd been a college professor for more than 20 years. She taught graduate students. So that meant multiple times a week, she was presenting in a classroom to graduate students. She then wanted to take the research that she had been working on, and she wanted to create a consulting firm based on that research. And what happened was all of a sudden she could not speak in public. All of a sudden she could not present in a positive way. And we went through this process. We had her imagine giving a presentation in a business setting where she's talking to folks. We imagined what was going on in the body, and we felt the physical sensation. And what we uncovered was that when she was a child, she had been assaulted by a family member. And because it was a family member, no one believed her. So she now had this belief that when I say important things to adults, they don't believe me. So teaching in the classroom setting was something that was super easy for her to do. That even though her students who were graduate students were adults, the power dynamic was such that it was believable and safe. But as she stepped out into the business world and was speaking to business owners and CEOs and trying to pitch her services to those places, she fell back into the power dynamic of when she was a child telling stories. Now, a moment like that is unlikely to come up in our own self-reporting when we are like a client saying that, or when we are just tapping on our own, because it's hard for us to make the connection between us trying to report something as a child and us giving a presentation now, because it wasn't about the speaking, it was about the power dynamic and the believability. And so once we were able to uncover that, it became super easy for us to do some work around that childhood memory and that childhood part that was showing up and doing healing around that. And this was a circumstance where it was less than 10 minutes of tapping. And all of a sudden, this thing was taken care of in a way that allowed her to speak in public. Now, that does not mean that we had taken care of every single part of that childhood trauma. But it meant that we had taken care of that childhood trauma, which was getting in way of the action that she was trying to do, going out and speaking in public. So again, the process, imagine taking the action, tune into the resistance in the body. When something shows up, what are you afraid of? What's going to go wrong? Listen to the answers. What proof do you have that that's going to be true? And then we tap. And then we use the tapping tools that we already have, because this process is about uncovering and unpacking aspects, which makes it easier for us to do this. So the way that I use this every single day is when I sit down, the first thing I do as part of my day is I work on my to-do list. Now, some of that to-do list has been created earlier in the week. Some of that to-do list has been from tasks that I didn't get done yesterday. Like at the end of the day, I copied over onto today's to-do list. Other come with tasks. So I have a tasks of my to-do list. And what I do is I then imagine myself doing every single task on my to-do list. And if there is no resistance, I move on to the next task. If there is resistance, I tap on whatever resistance there is about that task. So I look at first task on the to-do list, no big deal. Second task on the to-do list, no big deal. Third task on the to-do list, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to be judged. Great. I now have some resistance. I go through this process and I clear it out. Because the reality is, the 3 highest value tasks on my to-do list on any given day are more valuable than the rest of my to-do list combined, long-term for my business. But because they are the 3 highest value tasks, they have the most stakes attached to them. So they are the things that I'm more likely to resist because there is some sort of emotional jeopardy for trying and failing or whatever it is. And so if I don't do this in the morning, what I do is I spend a lot of time in the middle part of my to-do list. It's not the things that are unimportant, but it's not the things that are super important, because they're valuable, but there's no real stakes to them. So there's no emotional resistance. And because those 3 things are so valuable, when I started doing this, tapping on my to-do list, and I did it about a decade ago, when the resistance shows up, if I'm able to clear it even for just 90 minutes, I'm immediately gravitating towards the most valuable things on my to-do list, which means I'm doing the most valuable things first. So even if the fear comes back 90 minutes later, I got far enough along on those 3 tasks that I move forward in a really powerful way. And then the rest of the day, even if I'm not emotionally clear, I'm not doing things that have stakes as high, so it's easier for me to do them, even if I haven't tapped on anything. And so by going through this process, even if it doesn't clear me out and make it easy for me to take action for the entire day, it creates enough space for me to take action right now, which means that I have a really successful morning and the rest of the day stuff gets done. The change that I have made is I've actually started resetting my day at lunchtime. So I always take a break in the middle of the day. I go have lunch. I come back here. I never eat at my desk. I relook at my to-do list and I reevaluate the afternoon. And so therefore, if any of the resistances come creeping back, I can clear it out and have a really productive afternoon. Now, this process takes less than 10 minutes most mornings. So it's not as if I'm spending this huge chunk of time before I dive into my day, but by going through this simple process, I start being really super productive. When I started doing this, and I can remember this, and unfortunately, the company no longer exists, so I can't actually have documented proof of this. But I was looking at my web traffic and I was looking at my web stats. This is a long time ago when I started tapping on this. And the moment I started tapping on my to-do list, my web stats literally were going along, and then there was this huge jump, and then they were going along at a completely different level. Because as I was getting emotionally clear, I was reaching out so much more because that was the thing that felt dangerous. I felt like my work was going to be judged. I felt like it wasn't going to be seen as good enough. I felt like people were going to be saying no. And so by getting clear every single morning, I was doing those higher risk tasks, which were immediately turning into more people responding to my work because I was putting myself out there more. And it doesn't mean that everybody loved it and everybody responded positively, but because I was taking more bold steps, it was easier for people to find me and do that sort of stuff. So, questions about the process itself and how we step through that. Again, sneak on over there to the chat box and type in any questions that you have. So there is a question in here about better eyesight, vision, pain relief, and is tapping useful for that? Yes, it is useful for that. Unfortunately, that's outside of the scope of what we're doing today. But if you go to tappingqa.com and search for physical issues, I have a cute little process that has 15 questions that's really useful for doing that. Okay, it always takes me way longer than 10 minutes and not much results. Okay, Laura. So if it is taking longer, there might be more stuff there. And if you're not getting the results that you like, it might be an issue in the way that we're tuning in and unpacking things. Oftentimes, when I am in a circumstance where if I'm tapping on something consistently and I am not getting results on my own, that then becomes the opportunity for me to start working with someone else. Like I have a practitioner that I work with to tap on my issues because I recognize that I'm too close to things. And so a process like this is helping us to disassociate some, but it might not be getting you to disassociate enough. And so if you're still being stuck in that particular way, then working with someone else, maybe they're from the outside perspective are going to ask some questions for you to see some blind spots that you don't see. Let's see here. Do you tap while you're thinking about the issue? So this is one of the things that I always find really interesting, and this is a pitfall I fall into myself as well. Oftentimes when we're thinking about something, what we do is we will go, I'm going to think about my issue, and I'm going to ask questions, and I'm going to take notes, then I'm going to start tapping. The reality is that we know tapping plus tuning in equals results. So as we're going through a process like this and we're asking questions, it is really good and useful for us to be tapping at the exact same time. Now, oftentimes when we are reporting back and talking about what is going on, doing all of this extra stuff feels a little too complicated for us to focus. So one of the things that I like to do, and we'll do this today when we're working with some of you, is I like to, while we're doing the back and forth and we're asking questions and going through something like this, is picking a tapping point and just staying with that one tapping point during the reporting. For me, and this is just me personally, kind of the money tapping spot for me is the collarbone. So what I will often do when I'm having a conversation with a client or I'm tapping on my own is with my dominant hand, I will be just tapping on my collarbone. So then if I'm taking notes, I can be taking notes. And it's really easy and natural for me to while I'm doing that sort of stuff. I actually have one of my clients who, for the entire time we are doing the session, does not stop tapping unless I've given him the specific instructions to take a deep breath and give me a big stretch or have water. But literally, while we are doing everything with both hands, he does not stop for the entire time because he recognizes the value of that. I am not as disciplined about that. Sometimes I forget to do that because this was a realization that I came to later in my practice. But yes, I find it absolutely useful. As we are talking about the issue and as we're sharing, we're tapping. I actually have one of my clients, as she is explaining what is going on, she'll say 2 sentences and she says, "Oh yeah, I'm tapping." Like, she's just, because we do phone, we don't do video, she's just letting me know while she is talking, she is doing that, so that when I start giving her other instructions, it makes it easier. But I think it's an awesome thing for us to be doing. Um, how long to go on if I stumble on the first reason of not knowing what I want? I'm not exactly sure what your question means. Helene, if you ask that question again for me, what do you mean by how long do I go if I stumble on the first reason of not knowing what I want? And while she is doing that, what we're going to do in just a moment is we're going to do some tapping. So what I want you to do, the rest of you, while she's tapping in her question again, is I want you to think about, and if you have a pen and paper nearby, I want you to jot down 3 or 4 actions that you would like to be taking that you constantly do not take at all or tag as consistently as you would like. Because what we're going to do is I'm going to get some of you on the line. We're going to tap on that stuff. And I'm going to want you tuning into your own stuff, even if you're not with me, so we can get some borrowing benefits out of this. Because even though we're tapping on someone else's stuff, it's going to be there. Okay. Okay, great. So the question is, the first reason, not the process, is don't know what I want. Okay. So if we're getting stuck in one of those 4 steps, don't know what I want, don't know how to do it, it's painful to take action, it's painful to be successful. If you're really getting hung up in one of those areas, then more than likely there is some practical things that have not been solved yet. So if I don't know what I want, if we're not moving forward, one of the questions I like to ask myself is, if I'm not doing something, to kind of add to this process, if I'm not doing something I want to do, is to ask myself the question, what goes wrong if I am successful with this? So what goes wrong if I am successful having a plan? One time I asked a client of that, and she said, well, I've had plans before and I put my heart into them and they failed, and I don't want my heart broken in the exact same way again. So there is a consequence of having the plan. You know, what goes wrong if I learn how to do this thing? Well, if I learn how to do this thing, everybody's going to expect me to do it. Now, one of the things I learned a million years ago as a computer programmer, and I worked at a consulting firm, and I learned very early on, I never wanted to admit to anybody that I knew how to do networking and system administration. Because if I admitted to the fact that I knew how to do networking and system administration, every single time something went wrong with the Wi-Fi network at the office, and it was actually a wired network back then, they were going to come to me and interrupt my day so I could help them to solve that problem. So there was a penalty for being competent at something. Now, in that case, I wasn't subconsciously not doing something or subconsciously not learning something. I was consciously not letting people know I knew how to do something because I didn't want the consequence of that. But if you're finding yourself stuck at any point in the process, ask yourself the question, what goes wrong if I do this thing successfully? The other phrase I like to stick onto the front of that, which creates a little space, is I like to use the phrase, I know you don't know the answer to this, but if you did know the answer to this, what would go wrong if you were successful at this? Because by phrasing it, I know you don't know the answer to this, but if you did, I am giving my client permission to be creative. And so I'm giving them permission to think outside of their box of their experience. And by saying, I know you don't know the answer to this, but if you did, I'm giving them permission to admit something they might not admit in a conscious way. Because we're playing an imagination game. They're not admitting to something being wrong, which makes it much easier for the subconscious mind to bring something forward that then gives us the ability to go in and tap. Um, okay, so I procrastinate about cleaning my house and the clutter around me. So anytime, here's a fun little tip. It wasn't in the plan, but I love this. Anytime I am dealing with procrastinating around cleaning, I do two things. The first thing I do is I break it down into discrete parts because I can't clean the house, but I can clean my office. Maybe I can't clean my office. I can clean my desk. Super ADHD. When I was a teenager, if I was told to go clean my room, I would spend 45 minutes and I would touch everything in the room and I wouldn't actually clean anything. So what I would literally do is I'd go clean the socks, clean the socks, clean the socks, clean the socks. And I would go around and pick up all the socks. And I would do these things in these small little blocks, making it easier to make it manageable. So the first thing, if you're resisting cleaning, if you're procrastinating cleaning or organization, break it down into a discrete piece of it. And maybe it's just get all the paper on my desk into piles. And so I'm not even organizing them, I'm just getting them stacked up. The second thing I do is I think about the thing that is needing to be cleaned up. And instead of asking the physical sensation these questions, I pretend the pile can speak. I grew up at an age in which when I was in grade school on HBO, there was Fraggle Rock, which was created by the Henson Company. And one of the things in Fraggle Rock was there was this giant pile of trash outside. But the giant pile of trash was actually a Muppet. And so that there were eyes and there was a mouth inside of the trash, and the trash could talk. And so when I have an area that needs to be cleaned, I imagine it's the giant pile of trash in Fraggle Rock. And I imagine I'm asking the trash the exact same questions. What are you afraid of and what will go wrong if I clean you up? I had a client who was transitioning jobs. And the job that she was leaving, she was working with young people and she really loved working with young people. And she was moving into a role that was more administrative. When she asked all of the papers in her office why she was procrastinating and not cleaning them up, there was a part of her that said, if you leave this job, you're going to forget the kids and you're going to forget working with the kids. Now, that wasn't actually going to happen, but there was a part of her that believed that if I clean this up and I move on, I'm actually disconnecting myself from that particular experience and I'm letting it go. And when she was tuning into her own resistance, she couldn't find that piece of information. But when she used this exact same process, but personified the space that needed to be cleaned up, all of a sudden she found that information, which gave her the ability to access. So if you're procrastinating specifically organization and cleaning up, chunk it down into smaller pieces, and then imagine that little bitty piece can talk, and then tap on that in that way. Let's see here. Awesome. So you have been taking notes. I asked you to write a couple of things down. So if you'd like to do a little tapping with me right now on some of that procrastination, I'd love to grab 4 or 5 folks so we can tap on this. Just like last time, if you click on participants down at the bottom, you'll see a list of everybody. Down at the bottom, you will see that there is a raise your hand. If you want to tap along with me right now, raise your hand. I will unmute you. We'll do some tapping on stuff. While folks are raising their hands, what I'm going to do is a couple of the questions. Okay, don't feel anything in my body, but I just find excuses. We're going to tap on that in just a moment. I'm afraid that I love this. So if you're not in the chat box, I want to read this. Okay. I need to ask my flower beds what they're afraid of and what will go wrong if I take care of them. I'm pretty sure they're afraid I will kill them. Yes. Again, that's a joke, but also it makes a lot of sense. Like if I am afraid that I am going to do harm, then I'm not going to do that thing because I don't want to be the consequence of doing harm to someone else. I'm procrastinating and making money in the stock market. Again, so procrastinating and making money and doing something, asking ourselves the question is, what goes wrong if I am successful at this thing? Which is obviously something that's going to be in that place. Great. Okay, we are going to start with Anne. Anne, I believe I just unmuted you. Anne, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can. Excellent.
Oh,
So,
good.
talk to me a little bit about the thing that you are procrastinating on. What's the action you want to be taking?
Um, it's a little muddier than that.
Great, that's fine.
I um I am a volunteer for an organization, and I'm on with the communications committee, so I end up writing everything that needs to be written, like stories for the website,
Yep.
stories for the newsletter. I'm also the website administrator. Last week, I got asked to write a news release.
Okay.
And I'm like, I don't know how to write a news release. And I went into major resistance
Yeah.
that was Monday. Yesterday, I ended up sending an email saying, I am not going to write this news release.
Great. Awesome.
And there's all these things going on. It's one of those things is like, if people know you can do something, they assume you're going to do it.
Yep.
You know, like raising the bar is like, okay, you're a writer. You're going to write everything. I'm like, wait a minute.
Okay. Yeah.
So I feel like there's a lot of layers to it as a problem.
Great, that's fine.
Like,
okay. And so,
I also feel like
great.
It's
so
like
what I want you to do, let's tease it apart. Okay. Instead of trying to talk about all the layers, great, tapping your collarbone. Now I want you to tune into figuring out how to do this. Like, it's something you said you're not familiar with. So let's just start there. I want you to tune in trying to figure out how to do this. And
I've already done some of that. I went online. There are actually things that say how to write a press
awesome,
release.
great. Okay,
Salvation Army has a great video on how to write a press release.
Awesome. Okay, so I want you to imagine doing one then. And as you imagine doing it, and tune into, where does it show up in the body? Tightness in the chest, butterflies in the stomach, solar plexus. Awesome. Okay, great. So remind me in the chat box, if I don't talk about solar plexus when we're done, I want to stick a pin in that, but let's do this first. So I want you to tune into the solar plexus for me. Keep tapping on the collarbone. Ask the solar plexus what it's afraid of.
I'm not afraid. I'm pissed off.
Great. Awesome. Pissed off about what?
Oh, I'm turning red. I'm not getting what I want from this organization.
Awesome.
It is a community emergency response team, and I went through basic training. It's like how to deal with disasters, how to do first aid, how to take care of how to prepare, disaster preparedness. Just there's a whole slew of things, and then I find out that the Office of Emergency Services for my county has no intention of using us for that purpose.
Great. Tippy top of the head, just move from point to point, repeating after me. I recognize the fact that I'm really annoyed. And I'm really pissed off. That I'm not actually getting to do.
The
things that I want to do. And I don't actually get to. The opportunity to make the difference that I want to make. Instead, I'm in a situation where I'm being asked to not only do something that I don't know how to do initially. I'm being asked to do something that is outside of the scope of why I took this job. And if I demonstrate my competency at this, they're going to make me do more of this.
They're going to make me do more of this.
Which is going to push me even further away. From what I really want to do. And why I showed up to do this. And so I give myself permission to know. The anger that I'm feeling. And the resistance that I'm feeling.
And the resistance that I'm feeling
is trying to take care of me
is trying to take care of me
by pointing out the fact,
by pointing out the fact,
the way the path is at this particular moment
the way the path is at this particular moment
is not what I am looking to do.
is not what I'm looking to do.
And my system is trying to point that out.
And my system's trying to point that out.
And I'm aware of that consciously.
And I'm aware of that consciously.
But this part of me
But this part of me
wants me to be really aware
wants me to be really aware
that this is really not what I want.
that this is really not what I want.
And this particular instance
In this particular instance,
isn't just about writing press releases,
isn't just about writing press releases.
but it is one more opportunity
It is one more opportunity
for me to recognize the fact
for me to recognize the fact
that this isn't what I actually want.
that this isn't what I actually want.
And that doesn't mean
And that doesn't mean
I'm going to do something drastic in this particular moment,
I'm going to do something drastic at this particular moment.
but it's good for me to be really clear
It's good for me to be really clear
about what I actually want
about what I actually want
and what I'm getting in this moment
and what I'm getting at this moment
and how those things are not the same.
and how those things are not the same.
Nice big deep breath for me. Nice, Sean. Love that.
Oh,
Everybody else stretching you on as well? Great. What do you notice first pass through?
I'm feeling more relaxed.
Good.
But it's kind of just feel like,
Yeah.
Not. I feel clear, but I don't feel better.
Great. Awesome. Okay. Now, something that is really important for us to recognize when we are tapping is what you just said right there. That there is lots and lots and lots of different types of progress and lots of different types of relief. And sometimes what happens when we get more clear about the problem, the emotions actually go up. Because it's like, oh, it's this thing. And then all of a sudden it comes into perspective as like, oh, it's this thing. And it actually gets worse inside of it. And so healing goes through these steps, and getting clarity about what we're actually dealing with is a great step forward, but it isn't relief. So there's now clarity. What is the emotion that's hanging around now, or where is the tension now? Is it still the solar plexus, or is it somewhere else?
Actually, I'm feeling tension in my face, and I'm thinking, I'm almost embarrassed to even say this. I just left another volunteer position that I had done for a year. That the Marines have a term for it. It starts with cluster, and I just got really frustrated on a whole different lot of levels. What I did was like, okay, I'm going to clean this mess up. I accidentally ran to all the documentation I had needed 8 months before to do my job. I found that accidentally. I brought that up to speed. I was a technical writer for my career, so I'm good at writing. So I just brought everything up to speed documentation-wise. We put it in a shared drive. It's all there. It's ready to go. Next week is my last week. And I'm like, but there's like, I'm thinking about leaving this other organization that I had volunteered to become the website administrator only 2 months ago. I don't want to leave them in the lurch. And it's kind of feeling like I'm not doing a really good job picking these organizations.
Awesome. Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to tap here. And keep tapping for me. Now, just something I want to note for everybody else in this process. You'll notice that the first time it showed up in the solar plexus, the second time it showed up in the face. Sometimes it might stay in the same place. Sometimes it might move somewhere else. That's the reason why we leap back. Great. Repeat after me.
I got a headache on the side of my head.
Yeah. There's a part of me.
There's a part of me.
That is worried that.
That's worried that.
I'm making bad choices.
I'm making bad choices.
And I'm going from one bad situation.
And I'm going from one bad situation.
To another bad situation.
Another bad situation.
And I must be in a circumstance.
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of that.
I must be in a circumstance
I must be in a circumstance
where I'm really bad at.
where I'm really mad at.
Yeah, making
Bad
choices about
bad
this.
at making choices about
Yeah,
volunteers.
yeah. But I also recognize the fact
But I also recognize the fact
that volunteer organizations
that volunteer organizations
and social services
and social services
are notoriously bad
are notoriously bad
at how that they are run
at how they are run
because they are mission driven
because they are mission driven
and oftentimes lead with their heart
and oftentimes lead with their hearts
and do not have the domain expertise
and do not have the domain expertise
for good management.
for good management.
And so part of the reason why
And so part of the reason why
it's hard to find a good fit for me
it's hard to find a good fit for me
is because there aren't many good fits.
is because there aren't many good fits.
Because
I'm really organized. They're not.
I have a very particular standard
I have a very particular standard
about how I want to work
about how I want to work
and what is necessary to be successful.
and what's necessary to be successful.
And so
Me
I give myself permission
and I give myself permission
to be gentle with myself
to be gentle with myself
as I find a place that is a good fit for me.
as I find a place that's a good fit for me.
And it is okay
And it is okay
if it takes a couple of times
if it takes a couple of times
for me to find that place.
for me to find that place.
Because I recognize the fact
Because I recognize the fact
for true change to happen,
for true change to happen,
there needs to be a specific infrastructure in place
there needs to be a specific infrastructure in place
that I can use my giftedness
where I can use my giftedness
to help them be truly effective.
to help them be truly effective.
Because making true change
Because making true change
is not just about intention and heart,
is not just about intention and heart.
but it's also about the way we execute it.
It's also about the way we execute it.
Nice deep breath.
Oh,
How does that feel overall?
oh. Well, I've got a bit of a headache, which means I probably could use some water.
Probably. I have that impact on people sometimes.
We've
Excellent.
worked before, Jane. I don't know if you remember.
Yep,
It's been 5
I
years.
do. Absolutely. Yeah.
And
So,
thank you for
excellent.
referring me to Deborah Miller.
Good. Awesome. Excellent. So,
if I didn't thank you before. So
Good.
I'm feeling a lot clearer. I'm feeling more grounded. I feel like
Good.
I'm kind of more settled in myself and my body.
Yep. Good. I have a feeling that there's some more work here with this.
Oh yeah.
But I'm gonna move on to someone else so we can get some other opportunities. But thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Thank you, Gene.
You bet. Awesome. Okay. I'm gonna unmute Melissa. Melissa, are you there?
I am.
Hi.
Hey, oh, fabulous. Hey.
Awesome.
Right.
So,
So
what are you struggling with? Where are you at?
I'm just going back and forth between a couple of things. I think my website. So,
Okay.
but more about that is, I think more specifically, is I keep going back and forth between what I want to focus on for my niche. I know who my population is,
Yeah.
but I know I'm not allowing myself to go back, to choose like a burning issue, a problem. I kind of have a bigger arcing one, and I know there's a fear of putting myself out there. So I know there's that, and as I'm thinking about it, Yeah, I'm just trying to think where
Okay,
my
so
body.
okay, what I want you to do, so here is a perfect example of being in a situation where we have lots and lots of things that are creating this emotional constellation. And so tapping becomes difficult because it's just this giant miasma of what's going on. So when we do this, what I like to do is I like to break down the things that we're struggling with and just guessing on what we think is the beginning. Okay. So in this particular case, the beginning is choosing on how you want to focus before you because once you make that decision, the next steps follow, but it's hard to do the following steps that we haven't picked there. So I want you to imagine that you are going to narrow your niche. We're going to get off the phone here. You're going to narrow it down and you're going to make a choice sometime this afternoon.
Okay.
Okay. So as you imagine doing that, where do you notice the resistance?
I get, I feel like this pressure both in my chest and on my shoulders.
Okay,
and
great.
this kind of like, almost this sense of like putting my hands up. I'm like, no.
Great. Awesome. Okay, so practically everybody pay attention to this. Okay, so we're getting three sensations. We're getting the chest, we're getting the shoulders, and we're getting this hands up. Are those three different sensations, or are they the same sensation that is connected? Trust your instinct. There's no right answer. What does it feel like?
I get this little voice in my head saying, "What are you crazy?" It's so it's you know the shoulders is kind of like pushing me forward, and the hands is like trying to push me back. Like
great, awesome. Okay, so as you tune into those sensations, let's just deal with them as a cluster, because there's kind of a push and pull in there. Ask the sensations that are there, what will go wrong if you step forward?
I'll be ridiculed.
Okay. Ask it, what proof does it have you're going to be ridiculed?
The first thing that comes to mind is just when, so my niche, my is working with physicians and bringing EFT to them. I'm in the midst of trying to do, completing my EFT certification. And I've left medicine myself as a physician.
Yep, great.
So there's this, I recall bringing EFT to a physician meeting, like we had a staff meeting, and my medical director was like, "What the hell is this? What is this? Woo-woo, mumbo jumbo."
Great.
Blah, blah, blah.
Great. We have enough to start. Tip top of the head, just move from point to point. I recognize the fact.
I recognize the fact
that I am afraid.
That I'm afraid.
That if I follow this path.
That if I follow this path.
There are lots of people.
There are lots of people.
Who are going to ridicule me.
They're going to ridicule me.
Who are going to say that this is craziness.
They're going to say this is craziness.
That this is woo-woo crap.
That this is woo-woo crap.
And the only thing that we deal in.
The only thing we deal in.
Is hard science.
Oh my God, yes, it's hard science.
And I also recognize the fact.
And I also recognize the fact.
That there is no such thing as people.
There is no such thing as people.
People is a collective noun.
People is a collective noun.
That I use to describe a group of individuals.
That I use to describe a group of individuals.
And when I treat them as a group.
And when I treat them as a group.
I treat them like a giant monolith.
I treat them like a giant monolith.
Like they're all exactly the same.
Like they're all exactly the same.
And because they are part of a group.
And because they are part of a group.
There are things that they share in common.
There are things that they share in common.
But they are not exactly the same.
But they are not exactly the same.
When it comes to doing something new.
When it comes to doing something new.
There is a giant bell curve.
There is a giant bell curve.
And some people are super excited to try something new.
And some people are super excited to try something new.
And some people who don't want to try anything created after 1954.
And some people who do not want to try anything created after 1954.
And lots of people in between.
And lots of people in
And I also recognize the fact,
And I also recognize the fact,
with each passing day,
each passing day,
we have more research,
we have absolutely more research,
which demonstrates the efficacy of tapping.
which demonstrates the efficacy of tapping.
And when I'm talking to a more scientific group,
And when I'm talking to a more scientific group,
it would probably be good for me
it would probably be good
to lead with the stuff that they want to hear
and to lead with the stuff that they want to hear.
and to speak their language.
Definitely to speak their language.
Because when I'm speaking their language,
Because when I'm speaking their language,
then I have the opportunity to be heard.
because I have the opportunity to be heard.
When I don't speak their language,
When I don't speak their language,
they dismiss me right away.
they dismiss me that way.
Speaking their language doesn't mean they're going to agree,
Speaking their language doesn't mean they're going to agree,
but I'm much more likely to be heard.
but I'm much more likely to be heard.
And I don't have to convince
And I don't have to convince
every doctor that has ever lived
every doctor that has ever lived
that this is a good idea.
that this is a good idea.
Every single
Every single
doctor who opens their eyes to this
doctor who opens their eyes to this
improves the quality of care
improves the quality of care
to everyone they serve.
to everyone they serve.
So every single time
So every single time,
I find one person
person
who is a doctor
who is a doctor,
who is open to this,
who is open to this,
I have the opportunity to touch thousands of lives.
have the opportunity to touch thousands of lives.
And so I give myself permission.
So I give myself permission.
I need to learn how to communicate effectively
I need to learn how to communicate effectively
to this particular group of people
to this particular group of people
around this particular topic
around this particular topic,
and know that people will listen.
and know that people will listen.
Not all the people.
Not all the people.
We can't even get
We can't even get
everyone to agree on the fact
everyone to agree on the fact
the world is round.
the world is round.
So not one thing is going to be agreed on by everyone.
So not one thing is going to be agreed upon by everyone.
And so it is okay
It's okay,
that not everyone agrees
but not everyone agrees,
and not everyone listens.
and not everyone listens.
Because there are going to be some people
Because there are going to be some people
who I share tapping with
who I share tapping with
who are going to reject it.
who are going to reject it,
But they're going to hear about it later
but they're going to hear about it later,
and then hear about it again.
and then hear about it again.
And even though
And even
they didn't listen to me fully,
though they didn't listen to me fully,
I have nurtured the soil
I have nurtured the soil,
so it's easier for them to say yes later.
so it's easier for them to say yes later.
Nice big deep breath. Big stretch, move around. Okay, what do you notice?
So, much of what you said, I've already, I know, and I've done, actually. I've brought up the studies, and I've done EFT and physician groups since then online through COVID and all of that. But the thing that stood out for me, one of the things was that when you were saying, something about me being heard, you said it twice, and the thing that came up was, it's not safe to be heard. It's not safe to be heard.
Great. Okay, so as you tune into that sensation, it's not safe to be heard. Is that a voice? Is that a tightness? Is that a runaway? How do you experience it's not safe to be heard?
A sense of like wanting to curl up in a ball.
Awesome, great. So ask that sensation, what goes wrong if you are heard?
I get yelled at. That's what comes up.
Yelled at by who? Yelled at why? Ask the sensation. Don't intellectually figure it out. Ask the sensation.
I get mom, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, it was mom, of course.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely. Yeah, tip top of the head, move from point to point. I recognize the fact
I recognize the fact
that when I was younger,
when I was younger,
and still today,
and still today,
when I speak up,
when I speak up,
I am yelled at. Because in my past,
as in the past,
when I spoke up,
when I spoke up,
I was yelled at.
I was yelled at.
I was yelled at for lots of reasons.
I was yelled at for lots of reasons.
Sometimes it was for what I said.
Sometimes it was for what I said.
Sometimes for it was when I said it.
Sometimes it was when I said it.
And sometimes it's just because mom was in a bad mood.
And sometimes it was just because mom was in a bad mood.
It had nothing to do with what I was saying.
It had nothing to do with what I was saying.
Or the value of what I was saying.
Or the value of what I was saying.
But we want a strong connection.
But we want a strong connection.
We want to be accepted by our family.
We want to be accepted by our family.
And anytime we do something
And anytime we do something
that threatens that connection,
threatens that connection,
we immediately want to stop it.
we want to stop it.
We immediately want to steer clear of it.
We want to stay clear of it.
So I learned the lesson.
So I learned the lesson.
When I spoke up,
When I spoke up,
I would be yelled at,
I would be yelled at,
which meant I was unsafe
which meant I was unsafe
because I was in jeopardy of
because I was in jeopardy of
being pushed outside of the family.
being pushed outside of the family.
And I give myself permission to know.
And I give myself permission to know.
I am in a different place.
Much different place.
I am outside of the power dynamic
Outside of power dynamic.
of being a small child
Of being a small child
who is stuck in something
who is stuck in something
without control or power.
without control or power.
I now have power.
I now have power.
I now have autonomy.
I now have autonomy.
And it is now safe for me to be heard.
And it is now safe for me to be heard.
And that does not mean
And that does not mean
I talk all of the time.
I talk all of the time.
I share all of the things
I share all of the things
with all of the people.
with all of the people.
But it is safer for me
But it is safer for me
to speak up when I want,
to speak up when I want,
to share what I want
to share what I want
with whom I want.
when I want.
And I also have permission
And I also have permission
to stop sharing.
to stop sharing.
Just because I shared something in the past
Just because I shared something in the past
doesn't mean it has to be that way forever.
doesn't mean it has to be that way forever.
That I can let it go
That I can let it go
and make a new choice.
and make a new choice.
But I give myself permission
But I give myself permission
to know that I can share more than I am sharing right now
to know that I can share more than I'm sharing right
and feel safe.
now and feel safe.
Nice big deep breath. Okay, what do you notice?
So I feel lighter. I feel like before when I said I was like kind of curled up in
Yeah.
this like I feel like I'm standing more upright.
Good.
You know, and yeah, I feel more like okay, I can do this. So
Awesome. Good stuff.
So I
Now,
thank you.
yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's still some more layers to this and as you try it in more settings,
Okay.
but
Yes.
you can see the process of where we just kind of keep incrementally going along.
Yes, thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing. Awesome. Okay, great. Okay, so we've done some tapping and some experimenting on that. Let me know questions that you have, or as you I want you to tune back into, if you have questions, start typing in the chat box. If you don't have a question, I want you to tune back into those things that I had you write down at the beginning. And I want you to imagine yourself doing some of those things now. And what is the level of resistance that you now feel when that? So if something has changed or something's staying the same, type that into the chat box as well. And if you found a lot of shifting and moving in that, I'd also encourage you right now to do a little shifting and moving around a little bit. That it's always good as we're having our resource state change emotionally to move a little bit and let that stuff get unstuck from the body. Oh, great. So in a moment, okay. In a moment, as more questions come, let's see here. Is it common for us to have our emotions always show up in one place? It depends. It is not uncommon for that to happen. One of the things that I like to do when I'm paying attention, and I said to put a pin in this, and I'm glad that we're coming back to it, is to pay attention to the place that things show up in the body, because oftentimes there is a story about the place that it is showing up in the body. So for example, if we have things showing up in the throat, oftentimes that is associated with being heard or feeling safe to speak our truth. Now, it's not diagnostic. It's not that 100% of the time. If things are showing up in the shoulders, oftentimes that is the place shoulds show up. If it feels like you should be doing something, I should be living up to something in our family, I should be living up to expectations, I feel like I have the weight of the world on my shoulders, shoulds oftentimes show up there. Solar plexus, oftentimes things show up in the solar plexus. It has to do with self-worth. It has to feel about feeling safe about being ourselves. Oftentimes things that show up in the lower back have to do with financial issues. Now, again, it's not that every single time, but ask yourself the question, is there a metaphor about that? Oftentimes emotional things that show up in the legs or show up in the hips are about moving forward. Now, again, if something shows up there, I don't automatically assume that's the case. The exact same way I said that when a client tells me a story as to why they are that they are, I listen to that, but they might be a bad eyewitness. There's not an exact one-to-one correlation between what is going on in the body and what's showing up, because I can have pain in my shoulders because I strained a muscle, and it doesn't have to do with the should and something I'm carrying there. It's an actual physical injury, but that is something to pay attention to. So if it shows up in the same spot over and over again, pay attention to the metaphor that is there, but also it could just be the place that it's communicating. Like that's just a part of your body that is the effective way of getting your attention. And so just listen to it and just use it that it is there. Let's see, what else do we have over here? Okay, so I'm reluctant to try something that is new. And I'm even reluctant to try tapping because I'm afraid that I'm going to tap on the wrong spot. So one of the things that I tap on a lot is I tap on the way that we are biased towards the negative, that we have a psychological bias towards the negative. And what that means is we remember the things that go wrong. So for example, I have lived in this apartment for 7 years and 26 days. Moved in July 1st, 7 years ago. I'm in a 6th floor walk up, which means every single time I come home to my apartment, I have to walk up 78 stairs because I have counted them. In the time that I have lived in this apartment, I have tripped exactly 3 times walking up those stairs. And I can tell you the exact location in the building that I tripped. I can tell you the exact location in the stairs, who was there, and I can tell you what happened, including like a gallon of milk exploding all over the place and creating a mess. I walked up the stairs twice today because I went out in the neighborhood and got stuff. I have no recollection of walking up the stairs this morning, none, because it went perfectly well. And so I'm much more likely to remember the things that go wrong, which prevents me from trying again, either trying something new or doing the thing that failed in the past. And so the way that we deal with that is we tap for the bias towards the negative. And so it looks like this. I want everyone to tap along with me. Tippy top of the head, move from point to point. I recognize the fact there is a part of me that is trying to keep me safe. There is a part of me that doesn't want me to fail. And the way that it is keeping me safe is remembering the times it went wrong. Because if I remember the times that went wrong, I can avoid them in the future. But if I only think about the times that went wrong, then I'm not remembering accurately. Every single thing that I can do, with the exception of breathing, is something I had to learn how to do. It's something I did imperfectly in the beginning, and I can now do it. And so I give myself permission to know it is okay to be imperfect doing something, and to know my subconscious is remembering the failures more as a way of keeping me safe. It just happens to be working too hard. It just happens to be too focused on the negative. And it is possible for me to be imperfect and for me still to be safe. Nice deep breath. That approach, that disposition is something I tap on all of the time for myself and all of the time with my clients. Anytime we are in a situation where we're afraid that we are going to fail and do it wrong, I love starting there, because starting there gives us the ability to unpack that and move through it. Okay, so we're going to do one more piece of tapping, but once again, I want to just share a little information with you. Again, what we have been talking about today is the art of delivery. We've been moving through this process where we have been trying to figure out exactly how we tease out what the actual root causes are. Like you saw in the demonstrations that we did today, by asking particular questions, we were finding our way to root causes really, really quickly that gave us the ability to clear things that weren't obvious on the surface. You know, the art of delivery is knowing where to start. It's understanding how the healing process unfolds. So what we just talked about there, the bias towards the negative. If we understand the bias towards the negative, then we're able to deal with it and we're able to heal in a completely different way. As you saw how quickly we can find root causes by asking a couple of questions, we clear the issues in a really efficient way because we know where to start, we know what questions to ask, and it allows us to move through it. And so some of the stuff that I taught you here today is the stuff that's going to be showing up in the training that I'm doing. I'm doing it 3 different times. The last 2 weekends of August, the first weekend of September. The one in September, again, is geared specifically towards the folks who are in Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. I'm going to do it in the middle of the night so that you can do it during the day. I know how you people don't get the opportunity often to be able to do stuff in your time zone, so I'm going to be doing that. Like we did here, I'm going to have some presentation. I'm going to do some demonstration. The thing that we're not doing here, but we're actually doing there, is you're going to get a chance to break into small groups and you're going to get a chance to try it out with each other so you can learn in a natural, simple way. And then after you try it, we'll come back into large group and you're going to get a chance to ask lots of questions. It's going to be recorded like these classes. I've already heard from people who went back and re-listened to Thursday night as a chance to reprocess through stuff. It'll be recorded so you can go back to it again and again. The other thing that I'm doing is after we do the training, I'm going to have 3 different question and answer periods so that you'll get a chance to learn, you'll get a chance to try it, and you're going to get a chance to then, after you tried it in the real world, come back, ask your questions, and listen from everybody else if you're interested in the training and all of the details, if you go to masteringtheartofdelivery.com, you'll get all the details on the program, the days that I'm doing it, the times that I'm doing it, because all 3 weekends I'm doing it at a different time. The first weekend is geared towards the folks on the eastern coast of the United States and the folks in Europe. The second one is geared towards the folks on the western coast of the United States. The third one is geared for the folks in the Far East. If you use the discount code ZOOM, you will get 50% off. As you read through the stuff, if you have any questions, please let me know. Drop me a note, gene@tappingqna.com. If you want to have a conversation about that, let me know. I'd love to have you in the class. I'll put this slide back up in just a moment, but what I'd like to do is just end the session again with a little more tapping. Everybody, tip your top of the head, nice big deep breath. I appreciate the fact that this is a healing process. And not only is it a healing process, it is a process in which I can get better at. The more I listen to my body, the more I listen to my system, the better I get at doing exactly that. The easier is it for me to heal. And I appreciate the fact that all of my parts want me to be safe. That all of my parts want me to be healthy. That all of my parts only want what's best for me. And that's all procrastination is. Something that wants me to be safe. Something that wants me to be healthy as I navigate the world. It just happens to be working too hard. It just happens to be using a tool that isn't the most useful. I hear the procrastination loud and clear. And I give the procrastination permission to tell me why. So that my entire system can work more efficiently. And I can be happier. And I can be healthier. I am a work in progress. And this is one more opportunity for that progress. Nice big deep breath. Give me a big stretch. Again, there's all of the information on the class. If you want more information, let me know. Check that out. If you have any other questions on the topic that we talked about today, I'll hang out a couple more minutes here in the chat box. If not, at some point later this afternoon, the audio and the video from today is going to show up on the website so that you can download it and you can go back and you can re-listen. You can tap along to this again. All of the tapping that we did today will be transcribed. You'll end up with PDFs of that as well. Just keep an eye on the website. On Tuesday, we're going to spend time tapping on self-worth. I hope you come back and join us then. Awesome. It does not appear that there are any other questions showing up in the chat box, just lots of people saying hi and saying thank you. I really appreciate you spending some time with me on your Sunday, be it morning, afternoon, evening, whatever part of the world that you are in. I look forward to tapping with you guys on Tuesday, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.